So, picture this. A war kicks off thousands of miles away, and almost overnight, the South Korean economy starts to shake. Today, we're going to break down exactly how this distant conflict sent a massive shockwave through the nation, exposing a really critical vulnerability, but also, and this is the interesting part, unlocking a totally unexpected opportunity.
You know, at first, it seems like a real puzzle. Why on earth would a regional conflict an entire ocean away cause so much panic in Seoul? The connection feels a little thin, right? But as we're about to see, the links aren't just direct. They're practically hardwired into the very foundation of Korea's economy.
And the financial hit was, well, immediate, and it was severe. Just look at the Kospi Index, which tracks all of Korea's biggest companies. It just took a complete nosedive, wiping out all the strong gains that it made earlier in the year. And this wasn't just a case of nervous investors overreacting. No, this was a rational fear. A fear that a choked-off oil supply would send costs skyrocketing for Korea's industrial giants. You know, the Samsungs, the Hyundais. That makes their products more expensive, less competitive, and that ultimately threatens the entire export-driven economy.
So that plunging stock market, that was basically the fever. But what was the underlying disease? Well, this crisis ripped the curtain back on a critical Achilles heel, something sitting right at the very foundation of Korea's industrial powerhouse.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote right here, this is straight from a presidential cabinet meeting. The government itself went on record acknowledging that this war had revealed some really fundamental flaws in the country's industrial setup, flaws that had to be fixed and fast.
So here it is, the core weakness. It's a massive over-reliance on one single, incredibly fragile shipping lane. The Strait of Hormuz, think of it as the main artery pumping the lifeblood of Korean manufacturing, crude oil, into the country. Any disruption there, any blockage, doesn't just mean higher gas prices. It threatens to grind factories to a halt. It's basically a potential heart attack for the entire industrial body.
With the problem laid bare for everyone to see, the response had to be immediate and had to be decisive. The government kicked off what was basically a high-stakes global scramble to secure the nation's energy supply chain before it could lead to a full-blown manufacturing shutdown.
A presidential special envoy was immediately sent out on a critical mission to the Middle East and Central Asia. The objectives were crystal clear. Find other sources for oil, lock down shipping routes that completely bypass the conflict zone, and double down on relationships with key energy partners. And you know what? The mission was a huge success.
The first big win came out of Kazakhstan. This deal for 18 million barrels was strategically brilliant, not just because of the amount, but because the supply route is completely independent of the Strait of Hormuz. It was an immediate, meaningful step away from that primary risk zone.
And they didn't stop there. Next, they struck deals with traditional partners like Saudi Arabia and Oman for a whopping 255 million barrels. Now, this was secured by cleverly using different ports on the Red Sea and firming up new agreements, ensuring that a steady flow could continue even with the main sea lane under threat.
So, what was the result of all this rapid-fire diplomacy? Well, it's pretty stunning, actually. In just a matter of weeks, South Korea locked down roughly 90% of its required crude oil for the rest of the year. It was truly a masterclass in crisis management that put the nation's energy supply back on stable ground.
But the story doesn't just end with plugging a hole in the supply chain. Oh no! The whole narrative quickly pivoted from playing defense to going on offense, turning a moment of extreme vulnerability into a potential strategic advantage for the entire region.
And here's the crucial part. This crisis wasn't just a wake-up call for Korea, it was a huge wake-up call for the oil-producing nations themselves. They suddenly realized, hey, a blocked Strait of Hormuz threatens our ability to export just as much, and they started looking for solutions outside their own backyard. And this creates this fascinating, almost perfect opportunity. The oil producers need safe, stable places outside the Middle East to store their oil, kind of like an insurance policy against instability. And South Korea? Well, it just so happens to have large-scale secure storage facilities. The proposition is simple, but brilliant. Korea can transform itself from just a consumer into a vital energy hub for all of Northeast Asia, providing security for the producers and stability for the whole region.
This new way of thinking, turning a weakness into a strategic strength, it didn't just stop with oil. The government realized this crisis was a catalyst, a golden opportunity to push for a much more fundamental rewiring of the entire Korean economic operating system.
The key to this whole rewiring is a concept called negative regulation. Now, I know it sounds technical, but the shift in thinking is profound. For decades, Korea's system was all about positive regulation. meaning you could only do what the government explicitly said you could do. This new approach completely flips that on its head.
Think about it like this. Under the old system, if a startup wanted to test out delivery drones, they'd have to wait, maybe for years, for the government to write a specific law allowing it. Under this new negative system, they can start innovating tomorrow, as long as they don't do something on a short list of banned activities, like, say, flying in restricted airspace. The goal is to unleash the speed and creativity needed to compete in high-tech fields.
So, why does this all matter? Well, it's about reversing a really worrying trend of declining economic growth potential. By adopting this more global standard, especially in critical sectors like technology and biotech, the goal is to future-proof the Korean economy, to make it more resilient, more innovative, and way more competitive on the world stage for decades to come.
And that really brings us to the final, big question. A market panic set off by a distant war forced this incredible chain reaction. From a desperate scramble to secure oil, to a clever plan to become an energy hub, and finally, to a complete overhaul of the nation's economic philosophy. So, in an age that's really defined by crisis, can South Korea truly turn its greatest Achilles heel into its next great economic leap forward?